technical task analysis, we looked at the use case, we looked at the HTA, we looked at the scenarios, and many other kind of techniques. That one already we have done. Then there's something we call the capture of the user requirements. That one can be done using questionnaires, interviews, sampling. We also did look at that aspect in our course. This is something we are not able to look at, but you need to be able to set the usability goal. A usability goal, for example, could be, how will the system be learnable? What is the attitude of the user towards using the system you're coming up with? We also look at the design process. This one is beyond the scope of human-computer interface. We are not looking at the design process at the moment. That one is supposed to be done in system analysis and design, or SAD. After you do apply the guidelines and the heuristics, which we just call them the rules of developing the system, then the information that will be gotten will be feedback coming from the user, and that feedback will be feedback for designing the system. Now, this is what we are now currently doing. Before you can even start creating the system, you need to come up with a working model of how this final system will look like. And the information produced at this stage will be a prototype for user testing, so that the user can be able to interact with the system and give you some form of feedback. After prototyping has been done, we now do with evaluation with the user. And it's like giving the user the system or the prototype. Let them use the prototype, then they give you back the feedback. We shall still take again that feedback and feed it again back to the system. Then redesign and evaluate with the user. Everything in human-computer interface is about emphasizing on the user. If you are evaluating, if you are redesigning, then that one has to be done in collaboration with the user. And once you have been able to redesign and evaluate, then the last thing that will be coming up will be the final product. There's also the last stage, evaluate with users and report. And this one will be feedback on product for future systems. This one is more like maintenance. We have agreed that the system is okay, but we still keep on getting feedback from the user, so that from that feedback, you can be able maybe to predict some future systems, or maybe you can be able to see a problem with the system currently being used. The concept of the design phase is very straightforward, that it's a very iterative process. Number one, you design, or you have the concept that you want to be able to present to the user. Then stage number two, you do a prototype, or you implement the system. But you cannot just be able to get the system right with just one cycle. So you keep on repeating the cycle, and that's why you can see on the diagram, we are talking about evaluation, or the user test, or the analysis. And we keep on repeating that cycle until that time the user are now satisfied that this is the product we need. Once they are satisfied, we can stop at that point and give the user the product for use. So in system development, we always say that a prototype will simply be a working model of how your final system shall look like. This is something you want to be able to project to the user, that we are trying to come up with this system, and this is how the system will look like. The prototype should be done cheaply and should also be developed very fast, because it's a way of the developer to be able to get the requirements from the user. From human-computer interface point of view, there are a number of things you can be able to prototype. Number one, we can be able to prototype a series of screen sketch. And at one point, we'll be able to see how do we do the sketching. You can also be, or the prototype can be something like a storyboard, something like a cartoon-like series of scenes. What will happen after this happens within the system? The prototype can also be a PowerPoint show that will be able to tell the user exactly the system we are trying to propose. The system we are coming up with will look like this. It could also be a video simulating how the system shall look like. It could be a cardboard mock-up, and we look at how we can be able to do prototyping using the cardboard mock-ups. Or this prototype can be just a piece of software, but with very limited functionality, written either using the target language or any other language. And the work of the prototype is for the user to be able to know, or the person you are creating the system, to be able to get the look and feel. How will the final system look like? Once you have that information, then, once you have that information, the user can now start interacting with the prototype and give you some feedback. Is that feedback you're going to get, then you now incorporate it back to the system. You keep on refining the system until that point the user will be satisfied with what you are proposing. Once that has been done, there are a number of things you can be able to do. Number one, you can either define the prototype to become the final system. You can throw away that prototype, and after throwing away the prototype, you can now be able to create an actual system based on the prototype that was approved by the user. So there are different ways we can be able to use the prototype. Either we can define the prototype to become the final product, or we can be able to throw away, or we can be able to discard that prototype and now start creating a system, the actual system, based on the prototype that was accepted by the user. So why do we do prototyping? Number one, we want to try out ideas with the user and gather feedback. This is very important in system design. Don't just sit down there and assume that you already understand what the user needs. You need to be able to get some feedback from the user. Once you get the ideas from the user, once you gather the feedback from the user, then you can be able to determine what do this user want to be represented in your system. It can also enable the designer to experiment with an experiment. And this is a very tricky statement. The reason why we are saying we will enable the designer to experiment with experiment, because number one, that prototype is already an experiment. It's not the final system. So we can be able to interact with that experiment, which we are calling the prototype. And remember, we all call the last system to be the actual system. The system we are proposing is also an experiment. And that's why you find I'm using the word, the designer can be able to experiment with the experiment. Or you can be able to get feedback from this prototype, which we are saying it's actually an experiment. It's not the final thing. Number three, the prototype will also be much easier to throw away or to change. You don't want to invest so much time creating a system, and after investing so much time creating the system, then you find that the user do not buy your idea. So it's even much better as a designer, I first collect the requirements using the prototype, which is cheaper. And remember, a prototype, you can even do a sketch of the paper. You can do some PowerPoint slide. Show the user how the system will look like before you start even creating the actual system. So it's much simpler for you to change the system. it's much simpler for you to be able to discard that prototype rather than discarding a system you have been investing for years and years, and the customer, they don't buy your idea. Then number 4, the other reason why we do require prototyping, we can be able to prototype technical issues. We can also prototype the workflow. How does the data flow from one component to another? We can also be able to prototype the task design. How the screen will look like, it's something we can be able to prototype. How the information display will look like. Those things that we feel they are very controversial, those critical areas we have on our system, those difficult items we have on our system development, those are things we can be able to prototype in, or once we start prototyping our proposed system. So there's something we call prototype fidelity, and I know these are things you have done in SAD. So class, what do you mean by fidelity of a prototype? And it doesn't mean how faithful the prototype is. Fidelity of prototype, class, what does it mean? Prototype fidelity. Abigail, what do you understand by the word fidelity of a prototype? Abigail Wairimu, or she's not in the class. She just came, attended the class and disappeared. Abigail. Okay, it's good that you are very frank that you don't know. Ambrose, what do you mean by fidelity of a prototype? Fidelity prototype, what does it mean? Toretich, Anthony, what do you mean by fidelity of a prototype? Anton Toretich. Brian Atai, what do you mean by fidelity of a prototype? Lynette, I can see you have a suggestion. Audi, what do you mean by fidelity of a prototype? Okay, Eva Mosora, what do you mean by fidelity of a prototype? Faith, what do you mean by fidelity of a prototype? Okay, incomplete version of a prototype, that's from Google, not from Ambrose. Okay, when we speak about fidelity of a prototype, we simply mean how close is the prototype with respect to the final system. So that closeness of the system, of the prototype, to be very close to the system, to the final system we are proposing, it's what we call fidelity of a prototype. And we do have two types of prototypes. Number one, we do have what we call a low fidelity prototype. If you find that, the prototype we have been able to design, it's not even close to the final system in terms of the look and feel, in terms of the materials being used, then we shall now call that one a low fidelity prototype. A good example would be the paper prototype. If let's say you sketch how your system will look like. If let's say you sketch how your final system will be looking like, but that one is done on the paper. Number one, first we are using a medium that is not very close to the or that's not very close to the prototype we are designing. And in terms of look and feel, they are even not close to one another. That one, we shall call it a low fidelity prototype, because the prototype and the final system are not close to one another in terms of look and feel. A high fidelity prototype will be a prototype, that is almost close to the final system we are proposing. So if you use a certain medium, for example, you do a prototyping using a software, like let's say I'm doing a web application, and maybe the software I've used is HTML and CSS and a bit of PHP for me to show the user how the system will look like. And the final system, I'm also going to be using the same technologies. Then we do call that one an high fidelity prototype. It's almost like the final system. Sometimes you even find that it's very hard for you to distinguish between the actual prototype and the system itself. So we also look at something we call, or we can also be able to look prototypes in terms of depth and breadth. And based on this is something I just forgot. Just allow me to have it on the slide. Sorry, horizontal and vertical. I think it's there. I've just seen it. Sorry. So we look at the breadth and the depth of a prototype. And based on this, we can either say we do have a vertical prototype. An horizontal prototype. Let me just start with the horizontal prototype. Horizontal prototype will have breadth but no depth at all. Let me explain further. An horizontal prototype will be a prototype whereby it can be able to show you all the features that will be on the system. But this particular prototype will not be able to tell you exactly how the features are implemented in the proposed system. So that's what we are calling an horizontal prototype. We have the features, but it doesn't tell you how those features will be or shall be implemented within the system. So it's breadth but no depth. A vertical prototype will be an opposite of the horizontal prototype. It doesn't have breadth but has depth. And I can explain that further again. If you do, or if let's say you take a certain feature of the system and you try to explain further how this feature will be implemented by the proposed system into depth, from maybe stage number 1 to the last stage for that feature, then we can be able to call that one a vertical prototype. So vertical prototype, it's about the depth, not the breadth. We are not looking at the features, but we now look at a specific function and we try to explain into detail how that particular function shall be implemented by the system. The horizontal prototype will be one that has breadth. You can see all the features in the system, but it's just like a sketch. It cannot be able to tell you how those features shall be implemented within the system. So that's the difference between the two. And you need to be you need to be able to have this knowledge in your mind, because in the exam you can be asked, for example, can you draw maybe an horizontal prototype and also you draw a vertical prototype? But I'll take you through that process in a minute. How can we be able to sketch a vertical prototype? How can we be able to show an horizontal prototype? So I think I want to show you how the horizontal and the vertical prototype can be done. But let me just look at the prototypes. So we talked about the low fidelity and high fidelity prototype. One of the low fidelity prototype is a prototype we call the paper prototype. So this is a low fidelity prototype for early design iterations. And actually you can be able to sketch how the system will look like on either multiple pieces of paper, or you can also be able to do some kind of a kindergarten work. You do have different pieces of paper showing how the menu will look like, how the dialogues will look like, how the different window elements will look like. So interaction can be done by rearranging the pieces of paper. For example, you can tell the user, try to find an item, and you see how the user will be able to rearrange the paper. If that's possible, then it means that the user already understands how the final system will look like. Apart from rearranging the pieces of paper, we can also be writing the custom response. What do you what will be your expected, or what do you expect the system will be able to respond once you do this? Then you can also write it down, and that's a form of a paper prototype. The problem with the paper prototype, most of these things are very hard for you to be able to show in a verbal way, and therefore getting the right feedback might be a challenge for you in case you are dealing with a very complex software. So a paper prototype can be tested since we can ask the user to do a certain role, and then we watch how will that user be able to use, or how will that user be able to do that particular role within the system. So this is just an example of paper prototype. So you can be able to sketch how the system will look like, but you now tell the user, for example, can you try to find for a certain item? Can you try to add an item to the shopping cart? If the user can be able to do that by rearranging the paper, then you can be able to get that, or you can be able to ascertain that the user already understands how the proposed system will be able to operate. We can also have some computer-based prototypes, and these ones will be high fidelity prototypes. So this one will be a high fidelity prototype in look, but low fidelity in prototype. And when we are saying they are low fidelity in prototypes, in this case, it's a case whereby we are using some storyboarding tools. For example, you can sketch how will the system look like using Photoshop. How will the system look like using a software like Mockingbird? How will the software look, how will the system we are proposing look like using a software like Balsamiq? And this is the software I always use when I'm doing my own sketch on my side. So although in terms of look and feel, so it looks like an high fidelity, but in terms of depth, we are not able to show, or we are not able to show the user exactly how those functions will be done in the proposed system. So there are two types of the computer prototypes. Number one is what we are calling the storyboarding. And storyboarding is a case whereby you are going to be using a certain software to show how the final prototype will look like. Or we can have the form builders. If, let's say, I'm doing a web application, then I can be able to use HTML and CSS for me to design how the website will look like. And that one becomes a form builder. If, let's say, I'm using Visual Basic, then I can be able to drag and drop the items from the toolbox to the form or to the control where I'm creating my application. Then through that, I can be able to show the user how my final system shall look like. So either we are going to be using the storyboarding where you are using a certain software, or you are using a form builder whereby you are using a certain software that will be able to create for you how the application will look like. I want to just show you, since this is something I've mentioned, I want to show you how we can be able to construct an high fidelity prototype and a vertical prototype and an horizontal prototype. So allow me to share another screen so that we can continue. And I think that will be the end of the day. Once I've shown you how we can do the vertical and the horizontal prototype, then that will be enough for the day. So allow me just to project another screen. Just a minute. Just give me some minutes. I install the plugin, then we can continue. I don't seem to be having the software on my laptop. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, it's opening. I can share my screen on my side. I'll be able to deliver whatever I want with the software. So there it is. So this is the software I usually use for, just a minute. Unfortunately, it's like the software, it was a free version and it has expired. But let me just use what I have on the screen to do a demo. This is what we call a vertical prototype, sorry, an horizontal prototype. Let's say this is a system whereby I wanted to create a certain application for our institution. And this is how I envisage the system to look like. So I just do a sketch. So on the top there, that's where I'm going to be having my header. And on the left, I'm going to be having maybe an icon for my application, or the logo for the organization, then the name of my organization. In this case, I've called it the demo web app. Then on this side, we have a place for search. That means once I start creating the application, then the search option will be on this part for my application. The navigation, according to my horizontal prototype, then will be just beneath the header. And we are going to be having an image carousel on my home page. So I'm just assuming that I'm just doing a mock-up screen, or I'm doing a sketch of how the home screen will look like. On this side, we do have a quick navigation whereby I can be able to do some items. It's on that I cannot be able to change them from my side because the software has already expired. And down there, I'm going to be having the footer. On the footer, maybe I do have some icons for the social media, Twitter, Facebook, and the rest. And this is what I want to be able to implement. So in this case, this is what we call an horizontal prototype. The reason why we call it an horizontal prototype, number one, if you look at this horizontal prototype, it doesn't talk about how these features will be implemented. We are just having the feature on the system, but there's no way we have been able to inform the user. For example, if you want to be able to search for a certain item, if you want maybe to be able to contact us, how that one will be happening. So this particular kind of a prototype, that doesn't talk about how the features will be implemented. It's what we call, it's what actually we are calling an horizontal prototype. Just give me 1 minute to see whether I can be able to get another version of software so that I show you how we can do the vertical prototype. Can give you just 1 minute. There's something I'm trying for my machine. I think I've seen them. Just a minute. I think I've seen what could be the problem. Oh. Just bear with me. I have gotten the issue. Let me share my screen. So we do have the screen. It's actually coming on, just initializing. So I want us to use this software. We do what we are calling a an horizontal prototype. So you'll get so many components you can be able to use on your application. So first I pick the browser. Let me just take the browser first. So this is the browser, and maybe I'm creating a web page. So HTTPS, then maybe www.queer, maybe .edu. That's what the user will be able to see on their browser. Then on the top there, on my application, then I'm going to be having my header. So let me put the header, put an header just a minute. Can improvise one of these items. I can just pick a text box, and that's where I'm having the header. I think this one will not give me what I want. Let me just take something like just a minute. An image, we have an icon, just a minute. We do have combo box. Just leave that alone. So I'm having a problem with the header, but we can assume, for example, we want to have the menu. So on the menu, I think there are quite a number on this tool I'm using. So if you look at this one, there's an option for menu, which I want to pick. Just a minute. I've just seen the menus in a few minutes. This is a normal button. The menus were just here. They disappeared. That's a menu for iOS. Just a minute. Button, we have containers. Let me first pick a container. Yes, I can see we have a rectangle. So once I have the rectangle, I think I can be able to do the other things. Then that's going to be my header. Kindly just be patient with me. I believe by 10:45 we should be done. This is very important for our course. So I want us to put some label. So I just pick some label and put it there and say, this is square, call it. So I can actually be able to change the text. Sorry. So I want to call this one Queer Portal. Queer Portal. Then I maybe pick an icon. Maybe this could be an icon, or let's say this one could be the logo for Queer. So I pick just an icon just for the purpose of, sorry, just for the purpose of the mockup screen. Then I also want to put the option for the user to search. So on the form, there's a control we call search somewhere. There's a button for searching. Just a minute. Should be coming. It's not a button. I've just seen it in a few minutes. Keeps on disappearing. Yeah, there it is. So that's where I want to place my search. And that's how the header will look like. Then I go now to the menu. So I want to place a navigation somewhere. So if you go to the forms, you'll see an option where I can have the menu. So we can just have this button, or you can have the breadcrumbs. I've seen them somewhere. Sorry. Things just keeps on disappearing. I can have that, or whichever one which you feel okay. That one can be your menu, but there are also other forms of menus. So that's how, or that's where we shall be giving them breadcrumbs. But before that, I need to have a menu for my application. Just somewhere, it's just hiding itself. Yeah, there it is, the menu bar with the items. Then you can have whatever you want to have on the application. This one could be home. So this one will be home. This one, comma. This one would be about us. Maybe this one could be, comma, contact us. Sorry, contact us, and other menus. So that's how that one looks like. Then I'm hoping on this side, I want to place an icon, not an icon, a side menu. So allow me to also look for that. See, yeah, these tabs, there they are. Maybe this is home, products. Let me just do that because we are not doing the actual thing. So that's how my menu will look like at this point. Then in between, maybe I want to have a place where we can have a video where the user could be playing a certain video. And that's how that one will now look like. Maybe on this side, we want to have somewhere you want to do some adverts. So just allow me to get them. That's time. Just a minute. I don't have to have, I don't see my have something we can be able to put for the advert, but that's something you can be able to improvise. So I keep on scrolling. So down there, maybe you want to have some kind of text. So if I go to the forms, you'll be able to see this an option where you can be able to put some multiple text. Sorry, a block of text. You can just drag and drop it. Assuming that is where you shall be having some text. Then down there, you want to have some information where you can be able to have some latest information. So there's a control that we call the tabs. Just, yes, this one. So maybe you want to have a number of tabs. So this one would be, sorry, let's say this one would be latest news. That's what that's where the user would be able to see the latest news. Then on this side will be what is trending on my application. And this one could be, sorry. And this one could be hot. These are just examples we are trying. And then inside you can just have an icon. So an image and sorry, we can just do an image. Then after the image, we can have some block of text. Let me illustrate this. Then down there, we can just have our footer, which I can do it within a minute. So on the footer, we shall have the social media. I think this tool has all those icons. So if you look at the icons, you'll get the icons for the social media. Just a minute. No, they are not there. They have not been able to integrate that on the application. Sorry. So we can just leave the footer. So assuming maybe on the footer you wanted to put something, then you can go ahead and put the footer down there. And now this is what we call, this is what we are calling, sorry, this is now what we call an horizontal prototype. A prototype without depth at all. It's just trying to show you the features that shall be within the system. But it doesn't tell you exactly how these features shall be implemented within the system. If very quickly in the next 5 minutes, I want to show you how we can be able to do them, how we can be able to do the vertical prototype, because we said the vertical prototype will be one that has some kind of depth. So allow me to open a new project. And on the new project, I want us to assume something that for this one, so let me just pick some text. So I want us to have the following. So this one will be a case whereby the user wishes to search for a product or for a course. So that's the scenario. So step number one. So let me get some text again. So step one, move the cursor to the search field. So that's our step number one. And you can even denote how where the user will be moving the cursor to. I wish I can. A minute, please. So the user will be able to move the cursor, can just continue. So that is step number one. I wish I can be able to do a demo, all that can be done. Then we have step number two. Step two, type the name of the course. And can say, for example, e.g. computer science. So I want just to pick the same, and so computer science. So that's all what I can do from my side. Then step number three, Step number three, press the enter key. Press the enter key from keyboard. And I think now, since I'm not able to show you how to press the enter key, I'll just repeat the same thing. Sorry. Since I cannot be able to show you from my side how we can be able to press that, then we now proceed to step number four. Step 4. the system will begin searching, will begin searching for the course. And maybe we can use an icon, or we can be able to use an appropriate control that will be able to show you that is happening. If I come to the forms, there's something on, let me pick all. So there's something on progress bar, this one. Just pick that one. So that one will just be able to show you that the system will now be searching for the course. Then the last thing we need to do is just a minute. Text. Sorry. Select the course from the list. From the list of search results. So I just need a progress bar, sorry. I just need something that can be able to display the items. So this is a block of text. This I'm just using that for demo purpose. So I'm just assuming all, I do have a list with icons, list with icons. Yes, let me just use this instead. So we have computer science, BSc, computer science. Then we have BSc, computer science and education. Then we have maybe degree in IT. So that's maybe what you have been able to get. So when you are able to show that in that manner, how a certain function will be implemented by the system, that's what we call a vertical prototype. So a vertical prototype will have depth but no breadth. An horizontal prototype will have the features, but it doesn't tell you how the features shall be implemented by the system. And that's why I want us to end the class for the day. We shall be able to pick from there next week. Any question I can be able to pick upon? Any question which might not be clear, class, before we call it a lesson? Okay, I think the silence means that we are all okay. Then let's meet on next week on Wednesday. Can have a good day ahead.